It's about the dare, taking the dare. I don't know whether someone dared him to do it, but it was a risk. The year was 1960. He was 22 years old, and he decided he was going to go and make his fortune on Wall Street. A risky choice at best, daring to say the least. So he went to Wall Street and he opened up a small business trading in what's called penny stocks. And it turns out that he was really good at it. He was quite a remarkable financier and investor. And over the years, he built that small penny stock company to one of the largest securities and investment firms on Wall Street. In fact, as the company grew, he grew in popularity and notoriety. He joined the board of the NASDAQ and for a while actually served as the chairman of the board of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. Over the next 40 years, his company would grow and his life would prosper. He became very personally successful and wealthy. His family had a villa in France. They had a mansion on Martha's Vineyard. They had another mansion in Florida. He lived in a very expensive penthouse in Manhattan. And by the third quarter of 2008, his little penny stock company was valued at more than $65 billion. He was profiled in Forbes magazine and in Business Week, and it was a success that many people in the financial industry thought was the pinnacle. It was something many people were envious of. But it went away in one day. On December 11th, 2008, the FBI raided the offices of Bernard L. Madoff Securities and Investments and confiscated all of their records, seized all of their assets, and charged the founder and president, Bernie Madoff, with felony fraud. On March the 11th, 2009, he and his attorneys pled guilty to 11 felony counts. And on June 29th, 2009, Bernard L. Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in a federal penitentiary. He lived the last 12 years of his life in prison in Buechner, North Carolina, until April 14th of this year, when he died of chronic kidney failure. In 2004, Joanne and Bert Miro decided they were going to sell their life's work. Bert had built a consulting business over his professional life, and in 2004, they thought, this is the time for us to sell and retire and live a comfortable life. So they sold the consulting business that he had spent his professional life developing, and they had every intention of living a comfortable retirement. They had a golf condo in Florida. They had a share of a ski lodge in Vermont. They had a beautiful home in northern New Jersey, and they were close to their grandchildren in New York. And they imagined a comfortable life in the final chapter of their life together. One day they were at their country club in late 2004 when one of their friends was telling them about the success they had had in their investments. And he said that the return outstripped anything that anyone else had found, and he recommended that Bert Miro and Joanne Miro invest some in Bernard L. Madoff Securities and Investments. Bert Miro was a fiscally responsible man, so he had his broker investigated. He had a couple other folks vet out Madoff Investments, and they found that the returns were spectacular. So over the course of a few months, they transferred 80% of their life savings to Bernard Madoff Securities. On December the 12th, 2008, the Miros received a phone call from their broker. As Joanne Miro tells the story, Bert answered the phone, shook his head, said, "Yes, I understand," went silent for a moment, hung up the phone, looked at his wife, and said, "We have no money." He then left, walked into the bathroom, and threw up. Now, the Miros were hardly destitute. They were able to sell their condo in Florida and their share of the ski lodge in Vermont. They sold their beautiful northern New Jersey home for a handsome profit. And they were able to move to the small town in Vermont where they grew up, and they have lived the last 12 years modestly, fighting through attorneys to try and recoup some of their losses. But we don't have to be people who experience a catastrophic financial loss to just imagine what that would be like. To have someone who, because of their greed, because of their lies, basically had robbed you of your future. I think we can all understand how painful that would be. How devastating it would be to have all of these plans to work your entire life, to build up safety and security, to anticipate a comfortable final chapter of your life, and then to have it vaporized in one moment. I think we all relate to how devastating that would be. And I think the easy question to ask is why? Why would Bernie Madoff do such a thing? And the easy answer is, well, it's greed. He just was greedy, and he figured he could get away with it. The more difficult question is why did the Miros trust him? And probably the most invasive question we can ask is, why do we? Why is it that we put our futures at risk? Why is it that we find ourselves in a position of vulnerability where at any moment we could lose everything that we rely on and wind up empty and hollow? Why do we do that? The danger of that question is it's an indictment of all of us, because all of us are capable of those kind of choices. Because all of us are guilty of one thing, and that is more. Wanting more, needing more, pursuing more. All of us know if we have a little, that's good, but more, now that's better. And we all know that we are subject to that desire, to that hope, to that pursuit of more. And we all also know that unregulated and unchecked, that desire for more can run roughshod over our lives, that desire for more has no end. How much is enough? When do we say, I don't need any more? And we are all vulnerable to more. Today I want to press into that. I want to stick my finger in your eye and ask the hard question, why do we need more? Why? But more importantly, I don't want to just ask the question. I want to share with you what I believe is the answer, is the hope. What do we do about our desire for more? But before we press into that, would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight. That you would use your words spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to remind us of the power of generosity. May that be the dare that we take. Pray that for myself, for my family, and for all of us here. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. Why do birds build nests? Why do birds build nests? And why do bees build hives? Why do salmon swim upstream? Why do predators hunt other animals? Why do herbivores just eat plants? Why do animals behave? Why does nature work in the way that it works? I think we all know the answer to that question. The answer to that question is instinct. We operate on instinct. Bees operate on instinct. Birds operate on instinct. Bears hunt on instinct. Animals live instinctively. Everything that is alive follows a pattern. And instinct is a mysterious thing. How is it that bees know how to make a hive, or birds know how to make a nest, or salmon know what stream to swim up? How does the Arctic tern fly halfway around the world to find its nesting place? How do penguins find the place to go where they gather in the Antarctic? How do these things happen? We don't fully understand. We just know that every single living creature on this planet operates by instinct, including us as human beings. But why don't lions just kill randomly, just for the sheer pleasure of it? Why don't they just kill everything they see? Why do they only kill enough to survive? Why don't birds build fancier and fancier nests? I mean, don't the birds talk to each other? And one bird says to another bird, hey, check out my nest. Look at my nest. We added a third bedroom. You're still living in that little hovel of a one-bedroom nest? Oh, come on. Oh, did you see the nest down the street? It's a Frank Lloyd Wright nest. Oh, that's awesome. I don't know any animals like a fox that hauls into his den a work of art because he needs the comfort of laying next to a Van Gogh. And we upgraded our den. We hired a foxy designer to upgrade where we live, and we're so much more comfortable now that we have new fox furniture in our fox den. Why is that? Why is it that they operate, they live their life, their entire existence, from the moment they're born to the moment they die, with just enough? Because every creature on the planet does that, except for one. There's only one creature whose instincts are violated because they accumulate with no reason. And they gather to excess without purpose. And the only creatures on the earth that do that are us. Why is that? It's more. It's the need for more. Now, to some degree, that's not bad. It's not bad to want more. It's not bad to want more security. It's not bad to want more comfort. There's nothing wrong with wanting to provide a better life for yourself and the people that you love. It's not wrong to want to make more of a difference, to have more influence. That appetite is natural. But we all understand the danger of it, don't we? We all know it. Because we know when it goes unchecked, you wind up with a Bernie Madoff or an Adolf Hitler or a David Haney. Because how much is enough? When do I say I don't need any more? And we know from observing the behavior of the species of humanity over the course of human history that this out-of-control desire actually is disastrous for us as human beings. But what do we do to stop it? What do we do to even slow it down? How do we stand up in the face of the tsunami of more? Well, I know where it starts. It starts in the simplest of ways. It starts with generosity. Generosity is the antidote to more. Generosity and kindness and giving and sharing and caring. Generosity flies in the face of more. In the language of the study we've been doing from Proverbs chapter 3, I would put it this way: generosity is winning. Generosity is winning in life. Being generous is how we win in the infinite game of life. Being selfish is how we lose. Being generous is how we win. This is the wisdom of Proverbs chapter 3. In Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10, it says this. It says, honor the Lord with your wealth. What is your wealth? Well, it's anything you do well. It's anything that has value to you. It's anything that is a part of your life that someone else could find value in. Sometimes it's your talent. Sometimes it's your education. Sometimes it's your professional skill. Sometimes it is your literal wealth, your financial resources. Sometimes it's just your time. Sometimes it's just your ability to listen. Whatever our wealth is something that has shared value. And how do we honor God with it? By using it. We don't honor God by locking it in a closet or by keeping it in a safe. We honor God by using our wealth, by using our ability, by using our talent, by using our time, by using our financial resources to make the lives of those around us better. That's how you honor God with your wealth. And it says, and you share the first fruits of all your crops. It's important because the first fruits, you know what that is? That's the best. That's the best of it. Because we're really big on sharing the dregs. It's really easy for us to share the excess, isn't it? I've worked at our clothes pantry. I've shopped at Goodwill. I've seen the shoes that people donate. They donate them because they don't need them anymore. You know what? You know why they donate them? They think, oh, I'm being so generous. I'm giving you my old shoes. All you're doing is making room for new shoes. That's not really generous. First fruits is generous because first fruits is the best of. Before you know whether you have the resources to get through the week, to get through the month. The first part, the best part, that's the part that you give of all your crops, of all that you produce, the best of you, the best of your resources, the first of your earnings. And then it says in verse 10, it's amazing, it says, then if you do this, your barns will be filled to overflowing and your vats will brim over with new wine. I know, we live in Westlake. Nobody has barns brimming over. Any of you just harvest the back 40? Your barn brimming over here in Westlake? Any of you got vats brimming over with new wine? Because if you do, I want to know you. I want to be your friend. If we got somebody who has a vineyard who has vats brimming over with new wine, we need to be friends. But we don't have barns and we don't have vats, but you understand the imagery. What it's saying is if you do these things, then you will get this in return. In the Hebrew language, and particularly in Hebrew poetry, scholars have suggested that Hebrew poetry often forms itself in parallelism. And people who are smarter than me about the Hebrew language suggest that there are 5 kinds of Hebrew parallelism. There's synonymous parallelism, antithetic parallelism, climactic parallelism, emblematic parallelism, and then a 5th kind called synthetic parallelism. I don't know why they call it synthetic parallelism. But basically what synthetic parallelism is cause and effect parallelism. And that's what's going on in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. Verse 9 is the cause. If, or because you give, you honor God with your wealth, and because you give the first fruits of your crop, or if you do that, then, or therefore, your barns will be filled to overflowing, and the vats will brim over with new wine. It's an if-them paradigm. It's a cause and effect, and that's an amazing promise. I mean, you realize if that's true, that if I give a little bit, I get a lot. That's a Bernie Madoff level promise. I want in on that. I want the ROI on that return. I want to be a part of giving a little and getting a lot. Who doesn't want that? Now, I know there's some of you here, probably you're raised in a spiritual tradition. You really believe that. You honestly believe. There is an entire sort of study, a theological study called prosperity theology that really does believe that this is a promise worth relying on, that you give in order to get, that what you give you will get in return. It's kind of a name it, claim it theology. And if you believe in that, God bless you. And the check is written out to RIVERBEND. But most of us are cynics, and we're skeptics. And we say, okay, Bernie Madoff, you promised this return, but I ain't seeing it. I don't know. I gave my $10 on Sunday. I didn't get $100 back on Friday. I don't know where you come up with it. You give a little and then you get a lot. I'm not sure I trust that. I'm not sure I believe that. Well, to the cynics here, I would say, really? Have you tried it? Have you put that to the test? Have you said, here's the best of me? Here's the first of mine. Here's what is most important to me, and I'm giving it to you, and now I want to see what happens. Have you really done that? Have you paid attention to that? Have you tried that? I dare you. I dare you to try it. And I dare you to try it because I believe generosity is worth the risk. I believe that being generous, standing in the face of the tsunami of more, is worth the risk. Because I believe the promise is that what you get will be greater than what you give. Now, how do I prove that? Well, let's think about it empirically. Let's think about it scientifically here. How do I prove if I do A, I'm going to get B? Well, let's consider Newton's third law of motion, a law of physics, the law of motion in the universe. Newton's third law. In case you're unfamiliar with it, let me explain what Newton's third law says. Newton's third law states that all forces between two objects exist in equal magnitude and opposite direction. If one, object A, exerts force F sub A on second object B, then B simultaneously exerts force F sub B on F sub A. And the two forces are equal in magnitude and opposite in direction. The formula being F sub A equals negative F sub B. In some situations, though, the magnitude and direction of the forces are determined entirely by one of the two bodies. Say body A, the force exerted by body A on body B is called the action. And the force exerted by body B on body A is called the reaction. The way that most of us know Newton's third law is by the phrase, for every action there is an equal and opposite. This is where you react and show that you paid attention in 8th grade science class. Newton's third law says for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. To write Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10 in a Newtonian formula would say, F force A is what I give, and the response is equal F force B what I get. But is that true? I mean, let's be physicists for a moment. Does that happen? If I give cash over here, do I get cash back? If I give time over here, how do I get time back? If I give compassion over here, how do I measure compassion this way? If I give my skill or I pro bono my talent over here, how does somebody have to then, like if I'm a lawyer and I argue a case over here, does that mean someone will argue a case over here for me? We know it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. It's not an equivalency. It's not that what I give, I get by a multiplying force in return the same thing. So Newton's law does not give us empirical proof of the reality of the formula or the promise that if you honor God with all your wealth, you will then receive an abundance in return. But that doesn't mean it's not true. Because what is it that we get? Maybe the return on the investment is not of the same nature as what the sacrifice or the gift was. Maybe it's more subjective than that. And this is how I experience it. Why are some of you teachers? Why are some of you nurses? Why are some of you public defenders? Why do you work in public service? Why in the world would you become a police officer or a firefighter? Lord knows it's not for the money. It's not because you live this luxurious life. It's because you believe That if I give the best of myself and make a difference in the world, what I will get in return is the contentment and the satisfaction and the depth of significance that says, well done, that's good enough. Because you know as a teacher, or you know as a nurse, or you know as a public servant, or you know as a first responder, that you will not be repaid in kind, but you will be repaid multiples of gratitude and significance and contentment. I also know that it's true because I think the inverse is provable. What is the inverse of generosity? Selfishness. And you know what we know about selfishness? And it's provable. Selfishness sucks. Because selfishness is a zero-sum game. Selfishness is its own reward. Because you can stack up all your cash and put it in an account and lock it in a barn, and you know who cares? No one. You can take all of your talent and use it for your own ends, and you know the difference you make? None. And we know that selfishness has no multiple of return. And you know how we know that? It's the old phrase that I've never seen a hearse hauling a U-Haul. Because you can't take it with you. The legacy that we leave is a legacy of what we give. It's a legacy of our generosity. I think psychologically, I think philosophically, I even think logically, it's provable. Well, it's not empirical. I think the promise is reliable. What is the promise? If you honor God, because you honor God with your wealth, and you give of the best of yourself, the first fruits of all of your crops, of all of your work, of all of your effort, you give the best of yourself, then you will live a full life, and your barns will be full to overflowing, and you will produce something that is so desirable because it will overflow out of your life like new wine out of overfull vats. He was born in 1888 in Richford, Vermont. And it was a little town. It was a nothing town in Vermont. And at the turn of the 20th century, he had had enough of small-town Vermont life. He wasn't much of a student, so he dropped out of high school at the age 14. And at the beginning of the 20th century, he hoboed across America. It took him a number of years, and he made his way from town to town, just doing odd jobs, being a day laborer, working in farms, and picking up work where he could get it, just enough to get by. He eventually wound up in 1903 in Portland, Oregon. And there he got a job at a foundry as an ironmonger. And the foreman at the foundry noticed that this kid was good. He was hardworking. He solved problems. He was one of those employees that you looked at and you said, I wish I had a factory full of these guys. So when the foreman got an opportunity to start a new steelwork in San Francisco, California, he invited this young kid to move to San Francisco with him. And they opened their new steel mill in 1906 in San Francisco Bay Area. Does anybody remember what happened in 1906 in San Francisco? They call it the Great Quake. The entire city was virtually leveled, and there was more work than there were people to do it. And this young man was a quick study, and he learned trades. He learned carpentry. He learned plumbing. He learned mechanical engineering. He worked, and during that time, he gathered skills and knowledge, and eventually he didn't take a correspondence course. He found a friend who had a book that he had gotten for a correspondence course in this new field called auto mechanics. And in 1911, he studied, and in fact, the first thing that he ever bought for himself was a motorcycle. And you know what he did the first day he got the motorcycle home? He took it completely apart, down to the last screw, and put it together in one day. He said, I got a bachelor in motorcycle on that day. But he found himself to be very adept at the mechanics of these automotive repair, and so he and a friend moved to the Central Valley of California, to Stockton, California, and they opened one of the first auto maintenance garages called the Superior Garage in Stockton, California. Their business thrived until the outbreak of World War I. At the beginning of World War I, this young man volunteered for service, but he was rejected because he had a permanent neck injury. He was not only too old for the service, he was also 4F because he had injured himself in a motorcycle racing accident. But he wanted to serve his country, so he went to San Francisco and he worked in the shipyards, building the ships and building the equipment that the Navy would use to fight in the war. And after the end of the war, he went back to Stockton, California, and found that his partner had let the business go to seed, and the business was no longer viable. And so he signed on with a company called the Holt Machinery Company. At that same time, he wrote a letter to a woman that he had met on his journey across the United States 10 years earlier. He had met her for a few months in Wisconsin. Her name was Evelyn Peterson, and he wrote her a letter and said, I'm living in California now. I'd like you to move out here and marry me. And she did. And so Evelyn and this young fellow got together, and they worked, and they built back the business. And what he discovered working for the Holt Machinery Company was there were flaws in their design. He thought if you just change these few things, this machinery that they were using to grade roads and to clear fields, it would work so much better. He finally got so frustrated with it that he bought a used piece of equipment, modified it, and started his own contracting company. And the equipment worked so well that he started buying used equipment, modifying it, and reselling it. He did that for almost 10 years, and in 1929, his business of building and manufacturing road grading and heavy machinery was so successful that he said to his wife, let's do this full time. Let's start a manufacturing company. We'll call it the R.G. Letourneau Machine Company. And they started their company in 1929. And over the course of the rest of his life, the company grew to be a magnificent multinational billion-dollar company. By the start of World War II, the United States Army Corps of Engineers came to R.G. Letourneau and said, before we get into this conflict, we want you to start building us equipment for the Army Corps of Engineers and the Navy Seabees. And 70% of the heavy machinery that built the airstrips and the roads during World War II were Letourneau Manufacturing Company equipment. The company grew and had factories all around the world. In 1946, R.G. Letourneau realized, I'm creating more stuff than we have engineers to design and build. He held over 300 patents himself. And so he wanted to train a new generation of engineers. So he bought an unused Army hospital in Longview, Texas. And in 1946, he started the Letourneau Technical Training Institute. It exists to this day as Letourneau University. I've spoken there a number of times. In fact, I've spoken at their chapel there a number of times. Because of the 3,000 students, by the way, 80% of which are male, of the 3,000 students, they are required to attend a chapel 2 times a week. And if Letourneau University is famous for anything, it's not just the engineers and the mechanical engineers that they produce, it's their training of missionary pilots. They have trained thousands of missionary pilots who have carried the gospel over the course of the lifetime of the school throughout the world. But the amazing thing about R.G. Letourneau was not just that he was a devout Christian man. Even when he was living on $1 a day, he tithed. He would give 10 cents out of every dollar. He did it his entire life. But when he and Evelyn decided to form the R.G. Letourneau Machine Company in 1929, they didn't commit to give 10% of the income of the company and 10% of their personal income. They committed to live on 10% and give 90%. R.G. Letourneau Company, throughout its history, operated on 10% of what it made and gave away 90%. R.G. Letourneau and Evelyn Letourneau, until his death in 1969, lived on 10% of his income, and he became a multi-millionaire. When he sold the R.G. Letourneau Company, he just traveled the world telling people about his business philosophy, and people would ask him, Robert, how is it that you get by on just 10%? He goes, the only way I can explain it is I shovel out money as fast as I can, and the Lord shovels it back faster. And what I've come to realize is that God has a bigger shovel. Now I realize that R.G. Letourneau is a freak. He is the outlier. He is the opposite of a Bernie Madoff. But he is the reason I can say that generosity is winning. He is the proof. Whether you give 10% or you just keep 10%, he is the proof of concept that generosity is winning. See, we are instinctual creatures. If you are Darwinian in your philosophy, you realize that most of our behavior is behavior that we are born with. It is priorities and it is perspectives that cause us to want to survive and cause to want us to make the world safe for ourselves and for the people that we care about. The instincts to reproduce and the instincts to make our way through life are the instincts we share with every other creature. But there's only one thing that we do that is unique to us. And that is to have a relentless desire for more. And that's manageable. And I believe that it is manageable through the power of generosity. Just one step at a time, one act of kindness, one extra moment that you didn't think you had time for, one extra dollar that you didn't think you could lose, one extra effort that you didn't think you could spare, pushes back on the tsunami of more. And I believe that it's worth the risk. So I would challenge you to try it. You see, it's about the dare. And I dare you.